The last of the great Athenian thinkers was actually one of Plato's students. Um, and he was Plato's greatest student, in fact, a man who went by the name of Aristotle. Now, Aristotle is notable for a lot of different things, many things, right? One of the, just to name a few, right? So he was born in Macedonia under the reign of King Philip I, right? Uh, who gave birth to King Philip II, who was someone who was around Aristotle's own age and whom Aristotle grew up with. Because his father, Aristotle's father, was a doctor within the royal court of Macedonia. And when Aristotle was about 14, he was sent off to Athens to study at the academy, which was the first school in the West, or in ancient Greece, and was founded by Plato, something I forgot to mention in the past lecture, right? And it was the place to be if you were an intellectual, right? It was, by its nature, a little more than a little elitist and classist, right? You went there if you had the money if you had the money and if you had the brains. Plato did its best to make sure it was meritocratic in nature, that you could get in there just based off of having the mind, but money did play a factor in being able to go. More so in the academy's later days than it did in its early days. So when Plato died, he left the academy to his nephew, um, Glaucon, who basically wanted to turn it into a Neo-Pythagorean cult, where all that they studied was math and both Pythagoras' ideas and his uncle Plato's ideas. So Aristotle quickly made made himself a standout amongst all the people at the academy. And just within a few years, he was teaching at the academy too. Right? And he was Plato's greatest student and greatest rival. Right? Uh, Aristotle's metaphysics, his epistemology, everything of his pretty much exists in kind of uh, opposition to Plato's understanding of the things. And when Plato died and left Glaucon in charge, Glaucon kind of kicked Aristotle to the curb. And Aristotle, in what is probably one of the greatest forms of petty revenge in history, decided to build his own school right across the street, called the Lyceum. So the second ever school built in ancient Greece was built by Aristotle. And the last claim to fame of Aristotle's was he wound up teaching his friend Philip II's son, who used his teachings, especially those of politics, strategy, logic, strategy, and I want to say ethics as well, to some degree, to conquer most of the quote-unquote known world, or at least the former Persian Empire and everything. And that student and that son of Philip II's was, well, Alexander the Great. Okay, all that aside, let's get into Aristotle's metaphysics. Oh, wait, one more thing. We really only have somewhere roughly between, we think it's roughly between a third and a fifth of Aristotle's works. Right? A lot of his works are suspected to have been lost during, various purges and destructions, both by Rome and during the Crusades and whatnot. Just lost. Right? But what we do have fills these two volumes, right? In tiny little, nearly single-spaced 8-point font. Right? It goes on for over 2,500 pages, right? Or just under 2,500 pages. right? In that tiny font. And that was between a third and a fifth of his life's work. The man was a prolific writer and a monstrous thinker. And he presents perhaps not the first systemized metaphysics, but the most robust one for a long time. It remained the most robust metaphysics for quite a long time. So his metaphysics begins with this understanding that everything in the world, in the universe, has a teleological structure, right? And teleology just means everything is purposeful. So everything has a telos, or a purpose or meaning for its existence behind it, right? Those of you who grew up with Christianity, this will be a familiar thing, right? God created everything with a purpose. That's pretty much the same idea at hand here, except God isn't involved, right? It's just the universe itself is naturally purposeful, and the things in it have a natural purpose that are determined by their nature. Well, how do we determine what their nature is? That comes from his four causes, Aristotle's four causes. So the four causes are the material cause, the formal cause, the efficient cause, and the final cause. The material cause is just what it sounds like. What a thing is made of. It's material. Right? So like my water bottle here is made from metal. Right? I think aluminum, if I'm not mistaken. And it was made in China, according to the bottom. Never noticed that before. So it's made of metal, and it's got a straw and a cap that are made of plastic. Right? And it's made of an insulated metal too, so it keeps the water cold or warm, whatever I pour in there. And the formal cause is going to be the shape of a thing. So in the case of my water bottle, it's in the shape of a bottle. It's a cylinder. Right? The efficient cause is going to be what causes a thing to come into being. Right? How is it that it goes from its base parts? Excuse me. How is it that it goes from its base parts to its current form? Right? And the final one, final cause, is a thing's purpose, or its telos, right? Its telos is functionally its final cause. Now, what is the connection? What connects the final cause to the others? Right? That seems to be kind of quite outside of quite outside of it, quite outside the realm of like the other causes, which are all very logical and self-explanatory. Well, it has to do with the relationship between the efficient cause, right, and the final cause. Right? This is the main distinguishing feature. Right? For inanimate objects, the efficient cause is going to be external to it, which determines its final cause, or I should say non-natural objects, things like a water bottle. Right? Metal has a particular cause. Various metals have a particular final cause, right? And according to Aristotle, they have a particular efficient cause as well. But and Aristotle was one of those people who believed that everything exists on the earth for the purposes of man. Right? So if it's an inanimate, non-natural, or if it's an inanimate object, then its telos is determined by what use we can make of it, more or less, right? We develop chairs and water bottles and things like that, and we give it its purpose. Its purpose is given in its development, right? The base materials maintain the same remain the same from when they're just wood and metal to when they're shaped into a chair, when they're given a particular form. But in the process of giving them that particular form, we're putting intention behind things, we're creating things with a particular purpose in mind. Right? But this is quite different from, living things, right? Inanimate objects certainly do, most of our experience is that we use them for a particular reason, and that's the reason, right? And since we make those things, we made them with that particular purpose in mind, so that's their purpose. But what's the purpose of us, right? Of humans or animals, right? How do we get to that? Well, before we can touch on that, which involves Aristotle's theory of the soul, we have to look a little closer at the relationship between efficient cause and final cause, flush it out a bit more by talking about the nature of actuality and potentiality in Aristotle's Metaphysics.